Welcome to the Grow Down on Soil Health, the podcast where we dig deep into sustainable farming practices that can enhance both your land and your bottom line. I'm your host, Dr. Ben West, Executive Director of Farmers for Soil Health, a program established by farmers for farmers, dedicated to improving soil health practices and to enhance the environment and profitability for farmers. This podcast is in partnership with the United Soybean Board, the National Pork Board, and the National Corn Growers Association. Today's episode is all about the role that technology now plays in the adoption of new farming practices as well as overall profitability. Joining us today is Courtney Yuskis. Courtney is currently the Agriculture Commercial Leader for Sustainability at DTN and is based on her family farm here in Illinois. She's passionate about the impacts that technological advancements can have on farmers, such as improving their ability to make informed decisions when considering when and how to adopt new practices like cover crops, or the role innovative programs and platforms can have on profitability. Courtney, really glad that you were able to join us today.
Well, Ben, I think I'm glad to be here, but I guess we'll find out in the next 10 or 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, well, this is a long-form podcast. We could be here for 2 or 3 hours, so buckle up. So, Courtney, you and I have just got to know each other a little bit. You've just joined the DTN team leading their sustainability program, and you're one of our most significant partners in Farmers for Soil Health. You run our platform, you running the marketplace, lots of the technological pieces of Farmers for Soil Health DTN manages, and it's just really been a pleasure getting to know you the last few months. And I've just been so impressed by you, your breadth of knowledge about agriculture, but also your passion for the sector. Tell us a little bit about your background and how did you come to lead sustainability at a company like DTN?
Yeah, well, I'm a farm kid from here in Illinois, and I went off to college never thinking that I would come back to the farm, never thinking I would really be a part of agriculture. Always close to my heart, but there wasn't really an opportunity on the farm itself. And graduated with a business management degree that lasted about 6 months in Chicago. And I realized, no, I'm a farm kid at heart. I wasn't sure what to do. I ended up joining the Peace Corps, was assigned to Samoa in the South Pacific, and randomly ended up working with the Ministry of Agriculture there. And I think it just reignited my passion for agriculture, for being a part of an amazing industry. Even though I was in, Samoa, it kind of rekindled all of those thoughts that I had about the farming operation. And so when I came back to the States, I ultimately ended up back in agriculture, and I've been in the space ever since.
So tell me more about your Peace Corps experience, about Samoa. What did you learn there that it's influenced your life since then?
I learned a lot about perceptions of U.S. citizens. I learned very quickly that it was going to be an incredibly humbling experience. I learned that in Samoa, in that kind of environment, you can put a stick in the ground and it will sprout. Something will grow. And I learned a little bit about the export market and what it takes to actually try to get that kind of business up and running, which is incredibly difficult in a more traditional culture.
And what about the Peace Corps? So many people, don't know a lot about what the Peace Corps does. So what were you doing day to day when you were there?
Yeah, I would say the first 3 to 6 months, your assignment is to learn the culture, to assimilate into the culture. You live with a family that speaks little to no English, so you're learning the language, you're learning all the mannerisms, truly trying to assimilate. And then you move into your assignment, which is kind of phase 2, but also a secondary priority of the Peace Corps. And I happened to be assigned, as I said, to the Ministry of Agriculture. I was tasked with getting a grant from FAO. I still remember the amount. It's 3 million tala, which is about $1 million US dollars. I would say a third of that made it into the program thanks to the politics of in-country ministries and working with them. And so then it was just working with all the boots on the ground, and I would go around the 2 different islands, meet with different youth groups, which was really just any unmarried male, understanding what they were trying to do, if they were able to save any funds. There was a women in business organization that I helped start up and start, again, empowering women in particular to start to save and reinvest in different crafts and different agriculture practices and so forth. And that's really day to day.
Yeah, so that launched your career in agriculture, and now you lead the sustainability program for DTN. I suspect most of the people listening to the podcast know DTN, but might be surprised that they have a sustainability division or operation.
Yes, as was I when I learned about this opportunity.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of folks, especially as I look to more the farm community, there's a legacy perspective of DTN. It's the satellites, right? Like, I grew up with one of the satellites on the office desk, and that's where my dad spent every morning looking at the information there. Like, do not touch the DTN station in the mornings. And we all, had weather radar long before the internet. And then obviously we have Progressive Farmer in our media business, and I think we're known for that. But what I've learned in the past 6 months, and really over the past 2 years as I started talking to folks at DTN more and more, is just the depth of services that we have, including the data and the technology and the way that we can kind of productize the data in a way that ultimately, I hope, drives the kinds of programs like Farmers for Soil Health, where we are working towards sustainability, but we're doing it with a very practical approach, still focused on return on investment at the grower level.
Yeah, and obviously DTN is investing in this big time because you see the future. I mean, it seems like there is no future other than one where farmers double down on incorporating these practices, sustainability practices. That's what people call them now, but I mean, there's a lot of innovation in this space, but still a lot of farmers are not yet using just basic time-tested conservation practices like cover crops, no-till, buffer strips, the list could go on. And you're part of this big effort across the entire sector to help remove barriers and to help farmers begin incorporating those more and more of those practices. And there are a lot of barriers. There's, technological barriers, and there's agronomic barriers. That there's just knowing how to incorporate some of these into your farm operation. One of the big barriers these days is economics because of the state of the U.S. farm economy. Farmers are really struggling. There was heard a stat earlier today that potentially this year only 5% of U.S. row crop operations will be profitable. I don't know if that's true or not, but if it's anywhere close to true, it is a dramatic statement about the state of our farm economy. And if with that as the backdrop, trying to get farmers to incorporate something new that's going to, potentially require them to put some additional money into their operations seems like a tall order. So how do you think through this trade-off between, the cost of adoption of some of these practices versus their long-term return on that investment?
Great question. I don't know if others would agree with this, but I like to think of myself as a fairly pragmatic person. And so when you're approaching anything that needs an investment, anything, right, where there is going to be a long-term commitment to really see the change, you just have to step change it. And so you mentioned agronomic practices, you mentioned economics, you mentioned technology. I mean, technology in and of itself typically does not solve a problem, right? The technology has to incorporate whether it's the right data, the right outcomes, right? And it has to be simple and easy to use. When we make things overly complex, we won't see adoption. And so the simplicity of the Farmers for Soil Health program, especially with some of the modifications that we're hoping will come through from USDA, I think are only going to increase awareness and help bridge that gap between a change that we want today and the outcome that may not come for 2 to 3 years. And I think what we're hearing in the sustainability space is that there are companies, especially in the consumer goods space, that are willing to potentially fund this, but not in perpetuity. They're willing to fund a transition period of 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And I think about our program, the ability to stack that with some of these other incentives and really get farmers over the hump so they can start to see the longevity of these practices that are made. But there's still that transition period that does cost money. It may cost, it could likely require new equipment. It could require new practices, new education, new agronomic practices. Like that's a lot to take on in this economic environment. And so any way we can continue to stack offers and stack programs to ensure farmers get through that transition in a profitable manner is very important to me.
Yeah, and the good news is about these practices, and let's just stick to cover crops. The good news is the science is pretty robust that long term, it's definitely a value add. Maybe in average years, for example, cover crops may not add significantly, but it sure does in bad years and bad drought years. So the long-term economic proposition really strong, but it's that short term that's a pinch point right now.
Yeah.
So helping farmers through that financial risk with incentives is important. But what other barriers do you see aside from the economics? Because before the last 2 or 3 years, we went through a few years of really strong farm economy, and still a lot of farmers were not incorporating these practices. The latest stats that I've seen suggest 8 or 10% of row crop acreage nationwide uses cover crops. So there's got to be other barriers. What do you see as the other barriers, and how are you working at DTN to help remove those for farmers?
I would say more anecdotally, I think there is, maybe there were some mishaps, especially with cover cropping 15 to 20 years ago. I know in the area I live in, maybe some of the cover crop mixes were not well prescribed, and there wasn't enough agronomic expertise around to support them. So there ended up being a lot of increased moisture, increased pest pressure, increased weed pressure, and it kind of negated any positive impacts of cover crops. And so that sticks, I think, in a farmer's mind for a very long time. I also think with some of these family operations that maybe there's a lot of off-farm income still. Folks are working full-time jobs, kind of trying to keep the farm going on the side. They might have custom sprayers come in. They might, shop out some of the day-to-day needs on the farm. And when you can't guarantee that a cover crop is going to be terminated at the right time, then you're going to have a lot of problems. And if you're not controlling that yourself, then, again, all the benefits could be negated. As far as what DTN is doing to help that, obviously we have our ag division, but we have our weather services as well. So I'd like to think that the way that we're pulling that information through and exposing it at the farm level is helping farmers and their retailer partners understand when and how things should be done. I think we are trying to look at multi-year analysis to understand what the impact was in terms of weather, in terms of crop rotation, in terms of cover cropping, in terms of tillage practice, and really try to roll up and expose those outcomes in a more meaningful way that's more tangible for everyone to understand. Like you were saying, that the science is there to support this long term, but it's the short term. It's easy to say no in the first year or the second year, maybe even the third year.
And I actually think the current state of the farm economy, while really, really a bad situation for farmers and for the ag sector right now, I actually think it could provide an on-ramp to some adoption of some of these practices, because when the farm economy was really strong, farmers weren't forced to become more efficient.
That's right.
And some of these practices are going to lead to long-term efficiency gains for better long-term financial resilience in addition to environmental. So, one of the barriers that it exists for cover crops, and one of the things that new farmers oftentimes struggle with the most, is termination. Getting the cover crop terminated in time for the cash crop to be planted. And one of the biggest tools farmers have at their disposal are chemicals, glyphosate particularly. It's a really common way to burn down cover crops. But, there's folks right now talking about soil health in a very positive way and glyphosate in a very negative way. And I'm wondering, that the pesticide market is so uncertain right now. I'm wondering that specific piece of cover crop management, if you've got any thoughts about what the future looks like. What does the future look like if glyphosate's not on the market for cover crop termination?
I'm going to get out over my skis really fast here.
Yeah.
Again, I think whatever the future looks like has to be practical. And so it can't be all or nothing one way or another. If there is no glyphosate, I'm sure the first fix will be to try to find another chemical that does the same thing with the same effectiveness. Now, I think that there are probably alternatives, but the on-ramp for that and the learning period for the learning curve is going to be hard, especially if it's going to reintroduce those pest pressure, that weed pressure that had already kind of existed in the minds of the farmers. And now if there's anything that goes wrong and they're not using glyphosate, it's going to be the cover crops problem, not any other problem. And but I don't know, like, to be honest, Ben, there aren't a lot of cover crops in the area where my family farms.
Yes.
And so I don't know from an agronomic perspective. Like, I know up more in the hill ground, there are several farmers that cover crop, but in kind of the Mississippi River bottoms area, it's just not a prevalent practice.
Yeah, and one of the things I've learned is that there's no one approach fits everyone. I mean, Farmers for Soil Health, we work in 20 states, ranging from North Dakota to North Carolina and everything in between. And one of the things I've learned talking to cover crops in North Dakota, it's a very different conversation than talking to farmers in Illinois or Iowa versus Tennessee or North Carolina. Yeah, how do we help these farmers across this big geographic spectrum use this new tool? I say it's new to many farmers, in ways that they have early success, because that seems like that's really important, is to have early success with the practice.
Yeah, although I don't think you can always guarantee success. Even if all the science is right, even if all the parameters fall into place and everything happens, like, to me, it's more important about funding that transition period to ensure there's success after 2 or 3 years. So maybe year 1, you can't guarantee the success, but there's some sort of financial incentive to continue the practice so that you can get to those long-term outcomes. To me, that's more important than guaranteeing success in year 1. And maybe we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, I think we are. And let's talk about some of those financial incentives. I've talked with other guests about the basic framework of Farmers for Soil Health, how we pay farmers, and how the program works. But the piece that's most innovative of our program is the sustainability marketplace. And that's a piece that DTN is leading, along with some other of our partners. Tell everyone about that. What is the sustainability marketplace? What will it do? What benefits will it offer to farmers?
Yeah, it's a technology platform, and it's built to facilitate the trade of any sustainable outcome between a farmer and the end buyer, typically a CPG or a supplier to a CPG. What I have seen, and I think what DTN has seen for years, is that everyone in the food supply chain is expecting some sort of premium along the way. And that's not sustainable. I think that's why we're getting so much pushback for these companies to say, we may fund something for 2 to 3 years for the transition. We will not fund in perpetuity. That is not scalable. That is not cost effective for us. And so if we can build this platform where we've got suppliers that want to buy X number of regenerative acres to meet some of their sustainability goals, we can facilitate that today. If a CPG is looking to reduce their scope 3 emissions and purchase tons of CO2 equivalent in the marketplace directly from a farmer, we can facilitate that today. And it's because of the Farmers for Soil Health program, we're actually enrolling and activating these programs and these farmers, that we're able to generate these types of outcomes in the marketplace itself.
Yeah, and to steal a phrase from a colleague of ours, Christy Slay at the Sustainability Consortium, she said, ideally the marketplace will be a way to democratize sustainability.
Yes, I wish I could remember that in my own head. Yes.
I think it's a fascinating idea. I wish I'd come up with it, because I think it's brilliant to bring the same level of transparency to the environmental marketplace that we brought to the grain marketplace 100 years ago. So people can actually see data and know what any environmental outcome, whether it's carbon, whether it's water quality, is actually selling for based on negotiations of buyers and sellers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what we would like to see come to fruition.
Why do you think that's not happened until now? What has been the reason it's taken so long to get here? Because we've been talking about, how long have farmers been talking about this? 30 years? We've been talking about it a long time. And it's still a lot of ambiguity in the marketplace about what all of these outcomes are worth.
Agreed. A big part of me thinks that it's just this lack of alignment on how to get to the outcomes, or maybe there's been a lack of transparency all the way back to the original data sources. Because if you can't track your data back all the way and be able to verify that through the entire chain, then I think it's really hard to trade on an outcome that maybe hasn't been fully audited, maybe isn't fully compliant, maybe hasn't been thoroughly vetted. But, I'm going to go off topic a bit here, but if you look at CI scores, everyone claims to be able to calculate a CI score.
Carbon intensity
score, right. But how they're calculating those and what data sources are used are wildly varied across the board. And so there's complete distrust in the calculations overall. And I think that's wrong, right? There should be some sort of standardization. There should be agreement, or if not standardization, complete transparency all the way back to the starting data source and through to the methodology and calculation. And I think more transparency and more open discussions and perhaps more systemic changes and collaboration at supply shed level will move us in the right direction.
Courtney, it's been a real pleasure having you join us. So glad you're part of the Farmers for Soil Health team now. Look forward to working with you and your team in the coming years to make this program even more successful.
Yeah, I'm super happy to be here and love the passion of everyone on this team.
Well, everyone, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, follow us on social media, and check out our website, farmersforsoilhealth.com, where you can find out more about our program and how you can get involved. Stay tuned here for more insights on conservation and the future of agriculture. Till next time.